The world is in turmoil. Also, the post-corona era will be full of challenges, old and new. How do we safeguard the future of next generations? We believe the answer lies in resilience. For that, we treat you to knowledge and inspiration towards a resilient society.
A resilient society is, by definition, a society that is able to sustain its functions and prosper even in the face of adversity. Now, importantly, because of the many challenges we are facing, that goes beyond just bouncing back to a state that you've already had, but it means that you are able to respond to anything that may happen, but also to learn from shocks and disruptions like the COVID crisis and to adapt. So that means, in order to keep what we have, we need to adapt. And that entails, of course, different types of sectors. We know, or we rely very much on, for instance, functioning mobility systems, on transportation. We shop online and then rely on goods being brought to us. We rely on energy and we rely on clean water. But of course, other countries don't have these very well functioning critical infrastructures. And therefore, it's important to also expand our notion of resilience, as in coping with shocks and stresses, and to also look at what that means in different contexts. We've all been put through a stress test in the past year. And of course, the COVID-19 crisis has shown us all where our boundaries are and also where there are breaking points in our society. Also, that, of course, was not one of the crises that led to disruptions with floods or storms that are maybe more conventionally in the picture when we think about resilience. But it really showed us also how important it is to come together as a society and to help each other. And then obviously also research has played an incredible role. We are now in a phase when we are rolling out the vaccines. So again, I find this is not just a message of sort of being desperate about the lack of resilience, but also about being hopeful. And on another note, somebody has said, if that COVID crisis had hit us 20 years ago, it would have been a very different story, because now, although it was extremely stressful, but we were able to switch to an online mode of working together, of reaching out, online mode of education that protected many of us and also allowed us to, definitely not keep business as usual, but at least to have a sense of being connected and a sense of contributing and working with each other. Are we resilient? Resilience is, of course, also an ideal that we strive for, and it's something where we can increasingly become better at. The past year was definitely demanding for many of us. And I think we are all now, as the year comes to a close, looking back sometimes with thinking about what all happened and how the circumstances changed so much as compared to starting the new year 2020. So, but for me personally, I've been working on crises and disasters for most of my academic career. So of course there's a sense of that we needed to contribute. So when we saw the start of this crisis in January, February, we put together a proposal for a European project, very much ad hoc. At the time, we were still thinking we would be working somewhere in China or Southeastern Asia, and didn't expect that it would come so close to us home. But definitely, so there was, that's the Heroes project that we are currently now working on with many great colleagues from all over Europe. And I'm also there especially grateful that we have had the opportunity to contribute to addressing this crisis, and especially with, for instance, the resilient cities that are around us. We're in close contact with The Hague and with Rotterdam, and try to make the models that we built to better understand the spread also useful for them. So that was one leg relating to my research. But of course, like many others, we've also been, I'm also involved in education, and we had to reshuffle and reorganize all our educational programs. We've had to work with our students online, and we've seen definitely in the past couple of weeks and months that this online mode of working together is stressful and is not the same. So in a way, we've also we've had to become better in reaching out to each other, and also admitting sometimes that we are vulnerable and reaching our boundaries. And that, of course, has also impacted how we work together. And then finally, I'm also a parent, so I have a 4-year-old son, meanwhile, running around, that we had to homeschool, and who has developed an incredible expertise at knowing that when we are in a Zoom call, he has to yell his lungs out for ice cream, for instance. So that has also put our personal resilience to a test. I've already mentioned that I think technology is incredibly important. Why is that? Of course, we as a society owe a lot to technology. Without technology, like the computers we are using now, we would not have been able to connect in this crisis. Without technology, we would not be able to do all our Christmas shopping online and then have it delivered at our doorsteps. We wouldn't have energy, and we wouldn't have the prospect of a clean energy transition. So without technology, I think there is no chance to really become resilient. So in my understanding of resilience, it is not like the part of the discourse which says that we have to sort of deny and get away from all technology, but we have to use our power as scientists and researchers to understand how can we make better technology to empower people to build more resilient and sustainable societies. So within the 40U Center for Resilience Engineering, we are very proud to have a broad view on resilience. And that means that traditionally resilience in engineering is focused on single sectors. That means we, for instance, have tried to understand the resilience of the energy system, or the resilience of transportation and mobility, or the resilience of cyber systems. But if we look at the example of the autonomous electric car, then we immediately see that that combines all these three conventionally separated sectors. So there in one vehicle, we have together energy, mobility, and cyber. And that means these traditional boundaries don't hold anymore. So in the center, we are bringing together researchers that are looking at these problems from their own domain or disciplinary expertise, and try to bring that together as a whole. And that, of course, means we are striving to break down the typical disciplinary boundaries and invest a lot in that dialogue with each other. And then the second part of that is, of course, that we are not just all technology, but we are also human beings. And especially the COVID crisis has shown us how important behavior is. So we've all experienced how empty all of a sudden our tram lines were, or how empty the highways, and that we cannot plan for a resilient society without considering behavior. So we are also going beyond that typically technical notion of bouncing back or providing an infrastructure that is not failing, but we are really integrating also the social aspects, the social dynamics of resilience, and try to build resilient social, technical, environmental systems. So of course there are many colleagues that inspire me, because indeed resilience is such a broad topic and requires to bring together these many facets and perspectives. And it was really difficult to select any contribution for that table. But I would like to start with Mikhail Sirenko, who is working as a postdoc with me, also in the HEROES project that I just mentioned. But in his contribution on the table, he is showing the impact of droughts and increasing heat waves. So there we can see that the coming together of urban resilience and also the social parts that I was just referring to. So he has built a tool that monitors actually how heat waves translate to ambulance calls, and then also uses data analytics techniques to analyze the resilience of a city. In the case that you will see on the table, it is The Hague, and its resilience to heat waves. So for me, that's an extremely nice example of how data analytics, and maybe the fancier word now is artificial intelligence, can contribute to understand very much a phenomenon at the intersection of social and behavioral parts, as well as the built infrastructure and the physical environments that we have. So another example that really inspires me are colleagues from the Delft Global Initiative. That is an initiative that looks beyond the Netherlands or Europe, where we are often focusing on, but really tries to understand how we can contribute to create resilience for the people that are most vulnerable. And that is the people that are living under often dire circumstances in the global south. And that puts very different challenges on us as researchers, because often access is more difficult. Also, the resources that we have are much more limited, particularly if you want to build a solution that works in a sustainable way there. So on this table, I've, for instance, chosen a project by Peter van Ham that shows floating homes, how they can be constructed in the Philippines. And what maybe you don't know is that homes of people in the Philippines are frequently flooded. Also, a video that is called Racing the King's Tide gives a very impressive image of the situation, what it means if you are living in a house that is basically regularly flooded. So these floating homes help people there to literally keep their feet dry. Another example is the Schools and Satellites project that looks at how rainfall and weather can be made more predictable, in this case in Africa. And what I find really remarkable about this project is that it combines high-tech and great technology and satellites and satellite imagery to better predict with citizen science approaches, including in schools in Delft, so that people were co-creating the approaches for Liberia to better predict the weather there. Another one is the iWash project, and that relates to access to clean water. Because for all of us, you know, COVID maybe also was the year with the most hand washing, but not all of us have access to clean water to wash our hands. And in this project, researchers set out to first create community awareness and really explain and help people understand why it is important to wash your hands, something that may be very evident to us, but is not everywhere on the globe. And then also developed guidelines how, with very simple tool, everybody can develop a filter to clean water. And I find that very exemplary for ideas that are developed with state-of-the-art research, but they're taking really into account the context and constraints of these developing countries, and then not sort of put on their colonialist hat and say, we know how it works, but strive for an approach of co-creation, which is also very central to resilience, this idea of empowerment and working with communities. So we are also having on our table a webinar with Annemarie Hittibu, who is the Chief Resilience Officer of The Hague. We are very proud to have a close collaboration with The Hague, who is also one of the Rockefeller's 100 resilient cities. So we are really trying to innovate with The Hague and for The Hague. And of course, students are a central part of that. We are, at the TU, educating the next generation of engineers. But we also see that it is incredibly important that our infrastructures, our cities, are becoming more resilient. And therefore bringing the city, policymakers, decision makers, and students together in that webinar that you can also all see and attend is an incredible opportunity to show them, one, how relevant resilience is, but also, for instance, in the EPA program that we are running, to help them, to train them to solve these grand challenges that we are currently facing. Especially, I'd like to mention that we are also doing a choice experiment where we asked for your input on how important the Sustainable Development Goals are. Now, of course, in an ideal world, and following the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, of course, we would like to achieve all of the SDGs. But as you can also hear in the podcast by Jeffrey Sachs that is on the table,
we should understand that technology gives us the potential to solve problems, but it has to be technology mobilized for the good.
It is hard to achieve everything at the same time. And sometimes we have to make trade-offs. That means if we cannot achieve all the goals at the same time, we ask you, what would be your priority? Which goals do you think are more important than others? And we know that this is a terrible choice, but the reality is that some of our policymakers or decision makers may be actually confronted with these trade-offs. So in that sense, we hope that your input and your opinion on which of these SDGs are more important can also be helpful in understanding what societal priorities are. And therefore, we very much would like to ask you to click and participate in that choice experiment. In addition, we also asked students to contribute, and that is in the context of a project where we are developing games as open educational resources. And we asked them to create a game that would be interesting and entertaining for you to play at home. There were several student groups that started to work on that, and then eventually we are presenting you now with a board game, and that is material with instructions and printable boards and play cards for you to play at home and experience what resilience actually means. Many of us, of course, listen to music to, for instance, relax. But one of the grand pieces that also gives me hope and reminds me how grateful we also can sometimes be is Beethoven's Ode to Joy, which I also put on the table. And then, of course, maybe you know that this year would have been, or is actually Beethoven year. So we're celebrating Beethoven's 250th anniversary. But then, of course, all the concerts that were planned couldn't happen. And that's when the Rotterdam Philharmonic Orchestra came together in the first lockdown in spring and provided us with an online combination. And I think that this piece was also sung in many initiatives from Italy to Scandinavia by people just from their windows. And I think it has become something like a hymn on the hope that we can all have if we are united and if we realize that we have still many things to be grateful for.